Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson, rolling solo today. Chandler Holt off for the holidays, so hoping Chandler gets to enjoy his break a little bit. We apologize for last week's show. Tried to record it. The audio got messed up. The video didn't end up working, so we've had a couple of issues, but I have some backups in place today. Hopefully my audio recorder doesn't fail. I've got a separate video feed. If it's good enough quality, I'm just filming it on a GoPro. I don't know if that's going to be good enough to even put on YouTube, but we have a couple of audio formats that should allow it to work. So ideally, we have an audio podcast for you. I know it's been a couple of weeks. I appreciate everybody being patient. We do really respect your loyalty to the show, and we know a lot of people like to listen to it. It's part of your routine. We try and make sure we stay a part of it. So we will go over some of the normal things. Not a lot of news and notes necessarily for the Utah Jazz, but we'll go over what's happened in the game since we last talked to you, and then what's coming up for the Utah Jazz, because it's been very fascinating what we've seen. Clearly, the biggest story now is that the last two games the Jazz played looked like very obvious losses, especially coming off of 4 straight losses where the Jazz had fallen at home to the Lakers and Magic, lost on the road at Denver, got blown out, came back home, lost again to Memphis. You kind of thought, okay, Jazz are figuring out a way to lose games to make sure that they are set up to get a high lottery pick, and then they start winning games, and they beat the Detroit Pistons at home. You know, the day after Christmas, it's always weird. It's kind of like a home opener. Teams don't travel particularly well. Guys aren't particularly focused. I still don't think teams are taking the Jazz particularly seriously. And you come and you steal that game. Okay, that actually makes a little bit of sense. I get it. Second night of a back-to-back, going on the road. And again, San Antonio also coming back from the break, but they've been at home. They had just beat the Thunder 3 times in a week and a half, 2 weeks. You would think the Spurs would be sharp. They've got Victor Wembanyama, the future of the NBA, yada, yada, yada. And the Jazz just were better than the Spurs. The Jazz were just better at basically every position. I thought Vassell was terrible. I thought Steph Castle was terrible. Wemby scored 30. I didn't think he looked good. I thought Yusuf Nurkic was kind of the antidote that teams have been looking for Wemby a long time, which is just be big and be in the way and make sure he's not killing you on the glass. And that's exactly what Yusuf Nurkic did. So I thought it was bizarre. I was very surprised, just like I know Jazz fans were surprised. So Jazz win back-to-back games over the Pistons and over the Spurs. And we'll get to some of this in the mailbag. I'm going to do 2 weeks worth of mailbag questions, so I'm not going to stick with you too long here because we're going to have an extended Q&A aspect here. But the reason the Jazz are winning games like this is purely because of Keyonte George. And that's not to say that Lauri Markkanen's not a huge piece of it. Lauri Markkanen is doing what Lauri did when he made his first All-Star appearance. And maybe I guess the news and notes here is that the first All-Star voting returns did come out, and Lauri Markkanen was not among the top 8 international players. Remember, in the new format, they are just doing normal All-Star voting. They'll take the top 24 players, but the first 8 international players, or the international players, will go on an international team, and the remaining American-born players, United States-born players, I should say, will be split up into 2 rosters as well. So on the early returns, here are the international players that have more than Lauri Markkanen's 112,000 votes, which, by the way, not a bad return for Lauri, 112,000 votes. It's 16th overall in the West. But international players with more than 116 or 112,000 votes: Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Canadian, Victor Wembanyama, Denny Avdia, who, if you haven't looked at Denny Avdia numbers, I know there's a big push right now for Keyonte George as the league's most improved player, and probably rightfully so. We'll talk about Key coming up in a moment. But Denny Avdia is having an insane year. He's like 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists, or vice versa. Flip those numbers. He's playing awesome. Alperen Şengün, Jamal Murray, also Canadian. And those are only in the West. And then Giannis. Some of these guys get a little dicey on, do they consider themselves American-born, specifically Karl Anthony Towns. I'm not sure how he's going to view that, and may benefit him to be international-born if he's going to be a top 8 player in that sense. I think that could be part of it. But Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby also above. Oh, and Josh Giddey all have more than 112,000 votes and are all technically international players. So Lauri Markkanen's sitting right there at like 9, 10, 11, right in that range. If he gets picked, it would have to be because of the coaches pick him. And maybe rightfully so. He might get picked because the Jazz are exceeding expectations. We'll see if that's still the case coming up by mid-January, and we'll talk about what's coming up here for the Jazz and why I think these next 10 games, and I hate to sound like a broken record. I know I said this about the games leading up to Christmas would probably give us an idea of what the Jazz are going to do. I'm more confused than ever, and I think Jazz fans are as well. But to go back to where I was talking about Keyonte George and what he's done, we'll just pull up the last 10 games for the Jazz and look at some of their stats and who's been playing well and why the Jazz are where they are. Last 10 games, Lauri Markkanen's only played in 6 of them. So how much credit can you give him or take away from him? He is the Jazz's leading scorer still, 27 points, 48% from the floor, 38% from 3, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists. That assist number is really nice for Lauri. 1.5 steals. He's finding a way to make plays on the defensive side of the ball, which is very impactful. Keyonte George, over his last 10 games, is averaging 26.6 points. He's averaging 6 assists. He's averaging 4.7 rebounds. And he's shooting 46% from the floor, 42% from 3, and 91% from the free throw line. And then the big number where Jazz fans have been going back, or I know international or national analysts have been going back, is the last 8 games for Keyonte, because his numbers jumped to 30 points a game, 5 rebounds, 7 assists. And the only guys who have done that over an 8-game stretch, and credit Sam Vecenie for his work here. I think it's The Athletic, and he does the Game Theory podcast. The only guys who have averaged 30, 7, and 5 on 45, 40, and 90, I think are the shooting splits, are Michael Jordan and Luka Doncic before the age of 23 over an 8-game stretch. And Keyonte George is doing that. And, of course, Keyonte George is not either of those players. I don't know how good Keyonte George is, and I mean that in a good way. He's not Shea. Is he Donovan? Is he the third best guard in the NBA now? You know, is he... He's not Luka, I don't think. You know, those guys' ability to do everything on the floor offensively, rebounds, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he's a better passer than Donovan Mitchell is. Certainly the assist numbers are better, I should say, than Donovan is, which is fine. If you're just racking up assists by making simple plays, he gets in the paint at will. He finishes incredibly well at the rim now, which is not something he did. He's obviously clearly become a great shooter, 45% from the floor, and that can wane. He still has his, 0 of 8 games, and has some bad nights, as does every shooter and scorer in the NBA. I mean, go look at Dame's game logs. But, are you talking about a player of that caliber? Are you talking about Keyonte George as soon as the Jazz put the pedal to the metal and start trying to win games, that Keontae's going to make 6 straight playoff games? Is that where he is? He might be. That's what he's playing like this season. This isn't just the last 8 games. Keonte George for the season is been unbelievable. I mean, he's clearly been the Jazz's second best player behind Lauri, and I don't know if the gap is there at all, other than he had a slow first few games. He just didn't shoot the ball well. Had he shot the ball as well as he has over his last 20 to over the first 11 games of the season, we are talking about Keyonte as maybe the Jazz's best player. And here's the gap in their shooting percentages to give you a sense of where Key is compared to where Lauri is. Field goal percentage overall, every shot. Lauri's at 47%, Keontae's at 45%. 3-point percentage, dead on identical, .367, 36%, almost 37%. Free throw line, again, Lauri Markkanen, .903, Keyonte, .904. I mean, almost identical shooting splits from these guys. And Lauri is one of the truly best shooters in the NBA, and that's how Keyonte is shooting the ball right now. Keontae's shooting the ball like one of the best shooters in the NBA, and he's also become a very steady ball handler, playmaker, decent rebounder, has better size than Donovan Mitchell had. Not as athletic, obviously, but who cares? In all honesty, at some point, your game is more based on what you do on the floor versus what you do in the air, especially when you're only 6 feet tall. Keontae's probably 6'3". Donovan's really a close to 6'1", 6 feet flat. So I don't know. I don't know how good Keyonte is. I know he's winning games for the Jazz that they're not expecting to win. And I have a hard time saying put the brakes on him. You know, what you want is a superstar. What you want is a high-level, multi-year all-star who scores and hits big shots. And against San Antonio, he's hitting big shots and he's getting steals late in the game, changing the game on the defensive side of the ball. He's hitting big shots against Detroit in ISO situations to score late. That's not something Lauri does well. He doesn't create his own shot. And now Keontae's doing it, and the Jazz are winning as a result. It's like, that's what you wanted. That's what this entire rebuild is about, was finding guys who do those things, and now Keontae's doing them. I get the desire to add another draft pick. I'm with you. I put out a tweet after the Spurs game that said, look, if you're going to be beating these teams in back-to-back nights and you're going to beat enough of these teams the rest of the way, if you continue to operate this way, the Jazz aren't going to accidentally fall now into a lottery pick other than the lottery balls bounce their way. If the Jazz want to guarantee that they have one of the 6 worst records in the NBA, which basically guarantees they have a top 8 pick, which is what they need to hold on to it, they're going to have to take aggressive steps to do it. And if it were me making the decision, I probably would make aggressive steps to do it. And that means benching players. That means trading veterans, whatever you have to do. I'm holding on to Lowry. I'm holding on to Keyonte. I want those two to be the faces of my franchise going forward. They're proving that they can do it, and then I'm building rosters specifically around their skill sets and their weaknesses. That's probably would be my approach. How much can you do that without disrupting their momentum and hurting their long-term development? Is that a thing? Maybe it's not. The Jazz did it with the last 2 years to Lowry, and he's better than he's ever been. Jazz have put Keyonte into the fire. He's emerged miraculously and is playing incredibly well. They're doing all of this without Walker Kessler, who's going to come back next season if they want him back. So how do you develop that? Do you just shift everything towards Ace Bailey and say, okay, Key's a guy, Lowry's a guy. Now it's time to see if Ace Bailey can become the number 3 guy. Is he the number 4 guy? Can he jump one of those guys and be the number 2 guy, the number 1 guy? Maybe that's what you have to do the rest of the year. Maybe that's what you do starting January 1st when you're on the road, I think, against the Clippers. I'll pull up the schedule here, what the Jazz got coming up. But those are the decisions you got to start making. And you're going to have to make them specifically. You can't let these decisions be made for you because the Jazz, I don't think, thought they were going to be owning the 9th best record in the NBA right now. Now, the good news for the Jazz, if you are still on Team Tank and you want to see this team get the draft pick at all costs, the good news overall is that you have not really made any distance between yourself and the other teams in the NBA that are in this similar situation when it comes to tanking. A lot of teams around the Jazz right now are winning games that you would not be expecting to win games. The Jazz, if we're just going to look at a square number, are 15 and a half games back of the number 1 seed in the NBA. So that just gives you a number, 14 and a half back. Let me square that up again. The Jazz are 14 and a half games back of the best record in the NBA. Now you want to look at the teams below them. The Mavericks, the Hornets, and the Nets, 3 teams right behind the Jazz, are only 15 and a half games back. The Jazz are only 1 game ahead of them in the standings overall in the lottery. 1 game ahead of them. The Jazz currently have the 9th worst record in the NBA. The Mavericks, Hornets, and Nets, do they all have different win totals because they've played fewer games, different amounts of games, are all just 1 game back of the Jazz. So if the Jazz were, again, to pull the plug, start resting guys, start taking this really seriously that they want to get this draft pick, very conceivably, Dallas, Charlotte, and Brooklyn could all pass them in the next couple of weeks or next week if the Jazz wanted to lose out. Because the Nets are 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 3 in a row. The Charlotte Hornets are 5-5 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. Dallas Mavericks have lost 2. And the Jazz play them a couple of times coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So if the Jazz wanted to manufacture some situations where they lose those games and Dallas wins, I think they could probably do it. Other interesting names of note. Clippers, suddenly hot, won 4 in a row. Kawhi had 55 last night. They're 5-5 in their last 10 after they couldn't put one foot in front of the other to start the year. The Pelicans are 5-5 in their last 10. Yes, they've lost 3 straight, but they're clearly playing much better. They've got Zion back. Derek Queen's playing well. How long is that going to keep up? How many of these teams are going to hit the rookie wall and fall apart? I don't know. But those are the questions the Jazz are going to have to ask. I truly believe the Clippers are going to pass the Jazz because they want to win. They've got no reason to lose. They can still try and make a push for the play-in tournament. The Pelicans have no reason to lose. They don't own their pick either. They might as well try and win. Maybe they'll trade Zion. Maybe they'll fall back. I don't know. They've got no reason to fall back. In fact, it looks worse for them to finish with a good draft pick because then they just give that to Atlanta. It looks terrible for them. That's not what they want. Those 2 teams should pass the Jazz. And if those 2 teams pass the Jazz should finish with the 7th worst record in the NBA, assuming the Jazz themselves don't leap Milwaukee and the Trailblazers, who are both just a half game ahead of them. But the Jazz are right in that really delicate spot where you win too much, it's going to be too hard to get back into the lottery. But if you really want to pull the plug, you got to do it soon. And you still can. You can justify doing it at this point if you feel like guaranteeing you own the draft pick, whatever that means. Whether that's you want the lottery balls, whether you want to make the 7th or 8th pick, whether you want to use that as a draft asset, trade asset. That's a great trade asset. If the Jazz go into this offseason saying we don't want to add the 7th pick in the draft, the 8th pick in the draft, whoever that is, Michael Brown, Michael Brown, I don't even know how to say his name yet. I'm not watching the draft at this point. Nate Ament, all these guys who are going to be sitting there. If they don't want that piece, that's a great trade asset. One of the best trade assets the Jazz have had. And if you want to team that with salaries, with another player that's very good, with young players, you can get a lot back. And if you want to keep Lowry and Keyonte and trade this year's 6th, 7th, or 8th pick and any collection of salaries or young players or whatever you have, you could get an absolute haul back. A haul. That's why you want to have that pick if you're the Jazz and why you don't want to deliver probably the 12th pick to the Thunder or the 14th pick to the Thunder if you go all out and try and make the play-in tournament. That's the other aspect of why this is important for the Jazz. It's not just lottery balls to move up into the top 3. If you do, great. Move up into the top 4. Go and get, AJ DeBonsa or Cam Boozer or Darren Peterson. But, man, having that 7th pick or the 8th pick, even if you don't want to develop another young player to trade, is really, really valuable. It's really going to be helpful for the Jazz if they can do it. They just have to make the decision if that's the direction they're headed. All right, let's take a break. All right, let's look at the games the Jazz have coming up. We've talked about what they've had in the back. We'll talk about quickly what they've got coming up and why I think these next, 15, 20 games are really going to determine what the Jazz have coming up. And, again, 15 games is a lot. Of course, that's going to develop or tell the story of the Jazz's season. But here's what they're facing. Tuesday night. Home against the Celtics. Good team. Celtics are playing well. On the road for 4 straight. At the Clippers. Again, the Clippers playing much better. And a team that if the Jazz lose to and the Clippers win, that kind of counts as 2 games. At Golden State, struggling, but it's still Golden State. At Portland, a team who the Jazz are the half game back of. At OKC, that's probably going to be a loss. You can probably pencil that in as a loss, but I said the same thing about Detroit and San Antonio, and the Jazz won both of those games. Then you come back. You've got Dallas and Charlotte. Again, 2-for-1 games. You lose those games, Dallas picks up a win, you get a loss. Charlotte picks up a win, you get a loss. Those are important for the tanking standings. If the Jazz are going to tank, I think these next, 7 games will tell you a really good idea of what the direction is. It's after the new year. Kind of gives you a sense of what the Jazz are going to turn. You're a month and a half out from the All-Star break. You can't wait until after the All-Star break to make this decision. You've got to do it before then, and these are all tough games. Then you go on the road for a 5-game road trip. You go at Cleveland, at Chicago, at Dallas, back-to-back on the road at Dallas and at San Antonio again before coming home and playing Minnesota and San Antonio. The schedule gets really tough. If the Jazz want to tank, if the Jazz want to put themselves in a position to get their lottery pick back and feel very confident that they're going to have it over the next, let's count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 games. Let's say 14 games. If you go 3-11, you're probably in a really good spot. If you go 7-7, I don't think you're going to hold on to your lottery pick. I think it's that serious right now. I think that's where the Jazz are. I mean, and look, I know which direction I would choose if my job was on the line, and I will tell you why. I don't think it's that hard to go from 17 wins to 35 wins in the NBA. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but 35 wins. If you want to field a roster, look at the Phoenix Suns right now. Phoenix Suns are easily going to get to 35 wins. They were a disaster last year. They had to trade pieces for pennies on the dollar. They had to move a draft pick, a first-round pick from the Jazz, to get off of Yusuf Nurkic's contract, just to give themselves a little bit of breathing room salary-wise, and that really was just to cut their tax bill down. In one offseason, they went out and they got a couple of guys, couple of try-hard guys, traded a good player for some good veterans or some good role players. Dylan Brooks, haven't seen Jalen Green hardly at all. And they're right back to being in that play-in race, maybe even the 6th seed in the West. It's not hard to make the play-in. If you're basing your season on the feel-good aspect of making the play-in, I think that's bad management. I don't think that matters. What does matter is Keyonte George being awesome. Keyonte George becoming an all-star level player, even if he's not going to make it this year because the Jazz are a bad team, matters. That matters way more than getting to the play-in tournament, more than getting play-in experience. If play-in experience mattered, the Memphis Grizzlies would be awesome. They got to the play-in tournament. I think they beat the Warriors. They played the Jazz in the first round of the playoffs. Memphis Grizzlies haven't done anything with that value. They traded Desmond Bane because they wasted that opportunity. Injuries, off-the-court issues, things not matching up, cheap ownership, all that stuff matters. Making the play-in tournament doesn't matter at all, I don't think. I don't think that type of experience is good for you necessarily. Is it fun? Yeah, it's way more fun to be a fan of a team that's in the playoffs. I promise you. I know that. I know how Jazz fans are. I've seen Jazz fans check out. I answer a question every week. Why do I still care about this team? You don't have to. But it is more fun to win than lose. But for the upside of the team, having an asset you can trade, having another lottery pick if you want to come in and develop them, I do think is more important. And I think, again, over these next 14 games, I talked about that takes you up to January 22nd. But really probably over these next 5, 6, 7, we get a better sense of the direction the Jazz are headed. I don't know. I don't know which way they're going. I thought I knew. I had kind of heard some things behind the scenes secondhand that the Jazz were pretty set on keeping the pick, and that was the goal. And they won some games since then that would tell me the opposite. So I don't know. I don't know what to believe at this point, and I think we're just going to have to see what they show on the floor. I've talked to people, tried to get that answer. I haven't really been able to get a clear understanding of what the team's going for. We're just going to have to believe what they do. The actions are going to speak louder than the words here, to steal the Hoop Collective saying, and I think that's what we're going to see from the Utah Jazz coming up over these next 7 games. All right, we'll take a break. We got a lot of mailbag questions because we got a couple of weeks worth. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson rolling solo today. All right, long mailbag. I'll try and go through these a little bit more quickly, and then, of course, I'll write up the mailbag story, so you can always find that as well at kslsports.com later this week. We'll start with some DMs I got last week. Again, I'm going to try and address last week's questions and this week's. If I miss it, I really am sorry if I missed your question. I'm not trying to be obnoxious here. It's just something that could potentially happen. We will go with Josh Ebenezer. He sent a couple of questions in. He says, well, I'll answer the second question first because it's a little shorter. He says, are the Jazz a playoff this team this year if Walker doesn't get injured? The Walker thing here is so interesting to me. Why aren't the Jazz worse without Walker? Or would they be way better with Walker? You know, what if Walker now was on this team with Keyonte playing this well and Lowry playing this well? Or are they playing this well because there's not somebody in the paint sitting in that dunker spot every time? Not that Yusuf Nurkic is necessarily, masquerading at the three-point line every possession, but his ability to step out on the floor and shoot helps. I mean, it beat the Spurs. His ability to step out and hit those shots consistently drew Wemby out of the paint, and if Wemby's out of the paint, he's not blocking shots, and then he's not, the obvious defensive player of the year, Demogorgon, that's going to swallow up everybody around him. You need a five that can step out and shoot. And I know Walker hit, 3 of 4 to start the season over his first 5 games before getting hurt. Whether Walker's on the roster or not next year, he has to shoot the ball. Whether that's best for Walker or not, it's best for the Jazz. And if he can't do it, they've got to find somebody who can. It's just the value of today's league. When you have stretch fives and shooters everywhere, you need space. Look at how good Keyonte has become because of the space, how good Lowry is because of the space. The Jazz need it. And having Walker, even if it might help the defense a little bit, may not be more valuable than what having a shooter on the offensive side of the floor would do at that 5 position. So are they better? I don't know. I honestly don't know if they're better. Yusuf Nurkic has been not phenomenal, but certainly a surprise for the Jazz this season. He's been better than I think anyone expected. Might up his trade value as well, which I answer a question coming up here in the next little bit. And then John's other question. John Reader says, given the choice of Keyonte becoming who he is versus keeping the top 8 pick this year pre-lottery, which would you choose? Keyonte 1,000 times out of 1,000. I mean, look, there's a chance Darren Peterson's never as good as Keyonte is right now. You don't know that a guy's ever going to get to 24, 5, and 4. Those are really hard numbers. Those are all-star numbers. Keontae's playing at an all-star level right now on a non-all-star team, but he's playing that well. And if you can play that well, you've got a chance to win. And having Keyonte playing at this level is going to give the Jazz a chance to win, not just every night going forward, but in future seasons, chances to win at higher levels, playoff games, playoff series potentially, the same way Donovan Mitchell did. And, Donovan Mitchell helped the Jazz get to the second round. You've got to hope that Keyonte gets you to a higher level than that. Dan, let's see if he's got some questions from last week that I'll try to get to as well. He said, is John Morant on court someone you hope to see someone like Keyonte become? Ja's ability to get into the paint is similar to what has launched Keyonte into kind of this next stratosphere, but Keontae's ability to shoot the ball and not have to be so heliocentric as far as what the offense does around specifically just Keontae's skills, which is what you have to do with a guy like Ja because he can't shoot, is a real problem. So no, I think Keyonte could potentially be a better player than Ja Morant, which I know is a huge, huge statement and something that would have sounded crazy a couple of months ago, but Keontae's really playing at that level. Where would Keyonte and Lowry rank as an all-time Jazz duo if they stayed together and keep it up? Well, I mean, you got to win playoff series. If they could get to the conference finals, they could jump Donovan and Rudy. Now, Rudy's going to the Hall of Fame. Donovan's probably going to the Hall of Fame too because the Basketball Hall of Fame lets everybody in. And that's not a knock on those two guys. Rudy's one of the 10 best defensive players of all time, probably 5 best defensive players of all time, probably an argument for 3 best defensive players of all time. Certainly at a center position, he's in that conversation, top 5. No question about that. Donovan probably goes to the Hall of Fame. He's just going to end up with 8 all-star appearances and top 10 MVPs and 3 or 4 All-NBAs or 5 All-NBAs. Like, that's just a Hall of Fame criterion. I don't expect Lowry necessarily and Keyonte to get there. But if they get to the conference finals, doesn't that matter more? Don't Jazz fans care more about that? And if so, then you're up with Darren and Carlos Boozer. Like, I think that's certainly possible. No one's ever going to touch Stockton or Malone. I mean, Stockton's the all-time assists and steals leader. Mailman has 2 MVP trophies. They made it to the finals. But, someone's going to win a finals eventually with the Jazz. And if you're the 2 best players on that, where do you fit in? Is Kawhi more beloved in Toronto than Vince Carter? I'd have to talk to a Toronto fan. certainly like winning more than not winning. So I think you could get up there. You could jump Rudy and Donovan. You could get up there with Darren and Carlos Boozer. And if you can get to the finals, or win more conference finals games, or get to multiple conference finals, I think it's possible to jump those two. And then finally, Dan says, do you think it's competitive games and losses or events like the Jazz jersey swap will help keep fans interested in the team during a rebuild? Basically, does on-court and off-court matter more for potential ticket buyers? Ticket buyers on-court, I've talked about this a little bit, and not to burn him, I haven't really gotten his permission, but my dentist is a season ticket holder, and is exactly the type of season ticket holder I would expect a dentist to be, right? Good seats, has a kind of pretty good understanding of the team, knows the players for sure, knows Ace Bailey, asked me about Keyonte George, asked me about Lauri Markkanen, and, knows who the head coach is, like probably knows more than 95% of fans that are at the games. Not a diehard, because when they're not playing well, he kind of tunes out, probably gives more of his tickets away, but likes to hold on to his seats. So when they're good again, he has them and he can come back. Winning is what's going to bring people back. Now that the games sell out, fans like to go. It's a great event. The team's pretty exciting right now. The young guys are fun. The diehards are always going to be diehards. As soon as the Jazz are winning 45 games, making a push for the playoffs, fans will show up, because that's what Jazz fans do. And it's not fair weather. It's just people have full lives. And I think that's completely understandable. So I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go over to our mailbag questions. Again, I'm going to start with last week. So let me scroll a little bit on my Twitter page. I'm trying to do all this in one spot. But we can get to them here. All right. Again, and if you want to ask mailbag questions, find me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. Read me at KSLSports.com. You can always send me a DM. Find us on Twitter. I generally put it on Blue Sky. I didn't do the last 2 weeks. But Sleeper Jazz says, who would be the best fit on the Jazz current roster if we landed a top 3 pick, Boozer, DeBonsa, or Peterson? I'm quickly, because of the emergence of Keyonte George, leaning here towards A.J. DeBonsa or Cam Boozer. A big front court piece or a major wing, and A.J. DeBonsa would be helpful. Some people might think Darren Peterson ends up being the number 1 pick in this draft. He hasn't played a lot because he's had a hamstring thing while at Kansas. He's kind of been out of the lineup. A.J. DeBonsa over the last month has really emerged as maybe the best player. Cam Boozer always puts up ridiculous stats. Kind of think A.J. is going to go number 1. I think Peterson's going to go 2. I think Boozer's going to go 3. I could be totally wrong on that. We are a ways out on this, but A.J. is starting to play at an extraordinarily high level, scoring a ton. We'll see. We haven't even gotten into conference play yet. We could see that it looks totally different when you play a really good Big 12 schedule, or maybe he could prove absolutely he's the number 1 guy here. So we'll get into that. The nice thing is none of these guys are playing at weird small schools. Boozer's going to get a real test in the ACC. Darren Peterson and A.J. DeBonsa are in the Big 12, which is one of the best, if not the best, basketball conference. So those guys are going to get tested night in and night out. Any one of them is great. Look, if you have a superstar backcourt that has Keyonte George and Darren Peterson, and they're both awesome, great. Be a problem. Teams are going to start throwing their best defender at Keyonte George. Steph Castle, Keyonte just cooked him. Didn't even care that Steph Castle was on the other team. Keyonte just cooked him against the Spurs, and Steph is a very good defensive player. Make them choose between defending Darren Peterson or Keyonte George and having one of those guys on the floor at all times. That's a real plus. Jazz would be incredibly lucky to get any one of them. Josh Chisholm, what's Keyonte's ceiling? I feel like comparing him to Donovan Mitchell would be viewed as lazy just because Don was in Utah right before Key got here, but they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. I think their ceilings are similar. Other than I think Keontae's probably... What I like about what the Jazz have done with Keyonte that I thought they should have done with Donovan Mitchell was made him the point guard. Donovan is too little to be a full-time 2 guard and win at the highest level. That's always been my opinion. It's hard to be under 6'6" and win at a high level in the NBA as the best player on the team. That was always Donovan's curse. I think if you had had Donovan at the point guard, you could have unlocked some more of his playmaking, which was very good, and it was nice. It was secondary next to Mike Conley, but would you have been better off spending all the assets you did to get Mike Conley on a bigger guard to play next to Donovan Mitchell? The Jazz may have learned from those mistakes because the night they drafted Keyonte George, and I was skeptical about this, and I credit Justin Zanuck because he said it. He said they think Keyonte George can be a primary ball handler, which was not his role at all at Baylor. And, of course, they saw him in high school, and he had done more of that at AAU. But he didn't do that at Baylor, and he wasn't always good at it. He had a negative assist-to-turnover ratio, if I remember, at Baylor, and struggled with it at times as in his first and second year. But the Jazz committed to Keyonte being a primary number 1, a point guard. And they have stuck with it, and they have gone through the ups and downs of it. And because of that, he's emerged as a point guard. And having a 6'2", 3", wherever Keyonte is, point guard is more valuable than having a 6'3" shooting guard. It just is. It's never going to be all that valuable to have a guy, unless you're Steph Curry, who has unlimited range and still plays point guard for long stretches. Mostly, point guard, even though their system has been so, ball movement oriented, he hasn't had to do some of the pure, I'm just going to run pick and roll over and over sets in Golden State. Having Keyonte as a point guard is really, really important and might just make him more valuable than Donovan, as crazy as that sounds. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I went over their numbers 2 weeks ago of how similar they were in years 3 to one another. And you got to remember Keontae's a year younger than Donovan is and is playing a bit of a different position. And now his numbers are probably better because of what he's done over the last 8 games, really, since we last talked. Pingus on Twitter. Which young player the Jazz most likely to trade? It's kind of the weird mixture of you have to have value, so you have to have done something good on the floor, which, with all due respect, Cody was really good against San Antonio. I've told you I've kind of been in Cody's corner as far as I wouldn't totally give up on him. It just takes time. Imagine if the Jazz had given up on Keyonte George at the same point where they would be giving up on Cody Williams right now. And Keyonte had way more good games early in his career than Cody has shown yet. It's just absolutely true. I don't need to lie about that. But you give up on a guy too early, you may miss on something, and you don't want to miss on something. I don't think Cody Williams has a ton of trade value right now. Taylor Hendricks, you're probably giving up too early. Bryce probably has a little bit of trade value. Great shooter. But again, do you want to see what he looks like in year 3? I kind of do. Kyle Filipowski, pretty good. There are moments when he scores 20 and grabs 8 rebounds and dishes out 5 assists. I kind of want to see what he looks like in year 3. The name that I think does make sense, but again, he's been awesome at times, is Isaiah Collier. Is there a team out there that says we think Isaiah's the point guard of the future? The Jazz say, no, we got our point guard of the future, and we really like Walt Clayton, so we're going to stick with those two. Can you get a first-round pick back for Isaiah Collier? And then do you need another first-round pick? The Jazz have 2 more coming in next year with the Lakers pick. And that Lakers pick, I don't know, man. How good are the Lakers going to be if LeBron's done? They're pretty flawed. I know they've got a decent record right now, but they're pretty flawed. That could fall apart. You look at what happens with the Clippers. They fell apart this year. You might get a lottery pick out of it. Even if it's top 4 protected, you could still get a decent pick there. So you may not need to add more young players unless it's a top 5 pick. And so you don't need a 20th overall pick for Isaiah Collier. Again, you might just be better off holding on to him and seeing if he takes the next step and then trading him, or holding on to him and having him be a long-term piece next to Keyonte. I just said that would pull Keyonte off the ball, which I think is a bad idea, but I guess all those are on the table still. The Jazz don't need to feel dedicated to making any quick decisions right now at this point. And I would probably be more interested in trading some of the veterans that are stepping in and playing roles than I would the young players. But I guess I would say probably Bryce Sensabaugh and Isaiah Collier, just because they've probably been the best 2 young players not named Keyonte George. You could certainly put Flip in that mix as well. Nathols says, how long can the Jazz sit Lowry or Key before the league does something? There isn't a single reason to win a game. Get AJ next to Key, Ace, Lowry, and Kessler would give the Jazz a chance to get a ring sometime. Well, you can sit Keyonte all you want. It doesn't matter. The league can't do anything about that. In their rules of tanking, you are allowed to rest non-All-Stars. You can do that. The Jazz have kind of laid the groundwork for resting Lowry as long as you want. Rehab from a groin injury is probably pretty hard to prove. Now, the Jazz said the same thing last year, and the NBA fined him, whatever it was, $100,000 for resting him against Washington. It would draw the NBA's attention, but if you think it's worth it, it's worth it. Who cares that you spend $100,000 to get an extra, you spend an extra $100K to get Ace Bailey, you're probably thrilled about it. And had they got Cooper Flagg, look at how good Cooper is. Jazz would have said, that's the best money we've ever spent. So if you have to, you can. And you've already laid reasons to rest Lowry with this groin injury. And Keyonte, you can sit as long as you want. So it doesn't really matter. That doesn't violate the league's player participation policy at all, because he's never made an all-star team. Brandon Olson, with the Cavs sputtering a bit recently, can you remind us of how the pick swap would work with them this year and the protections on our own pick? So the Jazz have swap rights with the Cleveland Cavaliers still. In fact, I think it's with either the Timberwolves or the Cavaliers. Maybe it's just the Cavaliers this year. Just the Cavs. It is just the Cavs. The Jazz can swap their pick with the Cavaliers as long as the Jazz own their own pick, which, again, further goes into the why it's really valuable to have a top 8 selection in this year's draft. Because if it goes to 9 and it belongs to OKC, the Jazz don't own their pick, so they can't swap it. So, yes, let's say worst-case scenario. Cleveland sputters. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland go knee to knee. They're both out for the season, and the Cavaliers end up with the 12th worst record in the NBA. They're in the lottery, And out of nowhere, they have the same magic that happened to Atlanta or the same magic that happened to Dallas, and they move up to the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick or the number 3 overall pick. If they do that, the Jazz have swap rights only if the Jazz own their pick. If the Jazz pick goes to 9 and goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Cavaliers have the number 1 overall pick, the Jazz cannot swap for it. That's why it's important. Now, understand this also. If the Jazz end up with the number 1 pick swap rights to go get this year's number 1 overall pick, 2 pick, number 3 pick, whatever it is, the Jazz will do whatever they have to get their pick back from the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that's the right pick. That's the right move. And by the way, the Thunder have motivation to trade it back to the Jazz in that situation because the Jazz would move heaven on earth to get that pick back. Now, if it's the 8th pick, okay. Or excuse me, it can't be the 8th pick. Let's say it's the 9th pick. It's an okay pick. The Thunder would probably love to have the 9th pick. But if the Jazz were willing to give up next year's Lakers pick, the 2030 or whatever it is Suns pick that's completely unprotected, your pick of young players not named Keyonte George, probably not Lowry Markkanen, but maybe it's Lowry. Like, that's what you're talking about with this number 1 pick in this year's draft because you see how good, Cooper Flagg has been. If you could add a player of that ilk to your roster, you would trade Lowry to do it. It's just the truth. You would probably trade Keyonte to do it. It's just the truth. So if you had to trade one of those guys even to get the ability to swap a number 1 or number overall 2 pick in this year's draft, you probably do it. And you try and do it without giving up your young players because you would love to team Ace. And maybe Ace is the guy you have to trade. It's possible. But you would team this year's number 1, 2, or 3 overall pick that you would have swap rights to. Again, this is a real hypothetical of the Cavs falling out of the playoffs in the East. Very unlikely. And moving up in the lottery, also very unlikely. But if it were to happen, crazier things have happened, you would do everything you had to get your own control of your pick back to swap that draft pick. You would absolutely do it. And you would move whatever you had to get there. So while that is certainly the worst case scenario for the Jazz, I think they would find a way to get it done. If it were to happen, I wouldn't bet on it. Stephen Ritter, I've heard 2 philosophies on how the Jazz could approach development. 1, play only the young guys, let them grow and have all the experience. Or 2, play a mix of young guys, adults, and vets. The vets will give your young guys more stability and structure on the floor. Which is better? The Jazz played mostly young guys last year, and it seemed to work out just fine for their young guys. Keontae's a lot better than he was. Isaiah Collier, I think, is better this year. Flip looks pretty similar, hasn't made a huge jump. Again, you might want to wait till year 3 because that's how long it took Keyonte George. I do think veterans help. Veterans provide some stability, but they also provide wins, and that's kind of the gamble you're taking there. I think you want to have structure. I don't think a lack of structure entirely helps anybody necessarily because when you're winning, you're going to be playing in a structured sense. So giving guys everything all at once and expecting them to know how to give it back when it's time to give it back is difficult. I would probably want some veterans. I want veterans that don't help me win. The Jazz have a lot of veterans right now that are helping you win. Kessler World. Who's a realistic player the Jazz could acquire at the deadline? I've thrown out Benedict Mathurin with the Pacers quite a few times. I think I've already mentioned his name. It's kind of a name I would keep an eye on if the Jazz said, hey, we don't want the 8th pick. We don't think anyone's going to be better than Benedict Mathurin. You could probably go out and get him. Jonathan Kuminga is probably still available. I mean, the Warriors are a mess right now. They're okay. They're right there in the heart of the play-in tournament race or 6th seed in the West. It's just not good enough. So I think you could get names like that if you wanted to go and make a push. I don't know. There's going to be some names out there. Do the Jazz want to try and make a push? Is it valuable? I don't know if it is. Matt Wheatley, if the Jazz were really trying and then in the play-in or playoff spot, would the national view of Keyonte be different? Yeah, probably. If the Jazz were winning games and trying to win games, the perspective on Keyonte George would be one of the better young players in the NBA. I mean, remember, it was maybe was it a month ago? ESPN released their top 25 under 25, and Keyonte wasn't on the list. That's laughable. Keyonte's one of the 10 best players under 25 right now. I mean, he's playing at that level. And he wasn't even on the top 25 list. He was behind Reed Sheppard. Reed's good. Don't get me wrong. I like Reed Sheppard. There's some guys on this list. You have to believe Keyonte George is Keyonte George at the level he's playing is knocking on top 25 NBA player, not just top 25 player under 25, but he wasn't on that list. So, yes, to give you a sense of kind of the perspective on him, how different it would be. It would be different if he was playing on a winning team. If the Jazz were a winning team, how would teams prepare differently for him? Would he not catch him off guard and put up huge games? I think it's possible. James McKinney, if I'm the Jazz, I'm desperate to find a potential top 5 guy. Do you think the Jazz are going to be desperate enough to make a trade to get into the top 3 of this draft? Say they are between 5 and 8. If so, what do you think the cost is? I don't think the Jazz can I don't think you can trade into the top 3 of this year's draft. Barring a really weird situation where a team doesn't need Cam Boozer or a team doesn't need Darren Peterson. I don't think anyone's trading A.J. DeBonsa. I just think he's the type of wing that you can probably play 2, 3, or 4 as his body fills out, so he's going to be versatile. Every team can find a way to use him. If there was some team specifically that felt like they couldn't use Cam Boozer or had a loaded guard lineup and didn't, let's like say San Antonio ended up with Darren Peterson and thought Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper were better and they couldn't add another fourth guard. Could you give up everything to move up? Could you give up Ace Bailey and Lauri Markkanen and your own draft pick 8 to get up to 3? I guess maybe to draft Darren Peterson, but how much are you willing to give the Spurs to get a top 3 pick back? I just think it's going to be really hard to move into the top 3 the same way it would have been last year. Derek Nem, odd question, but one of the things I like seeing from Ace is that he fouls a player and they fall to the floor. He usually offers a hand to help the player up. I rarely see NBA players do this. Are players told to let the other team help the players up, or is it just a preference? I think that's a player preference. Some players don't let opposing teammates help them up. Some guys do. If it seems like it was within the flow of the game, a lot of guys will let you help them up. If it feels like it's a competitive game, generally they don't. Ace is a nice guy. He's a really nice kid. So that's not surprising to me. I think he's just kind of a generally nice person. I need to listen to the old ball in the or the old man in the 3. I haven't listened to that podcast yet, but the clips I've seen certainly show off kind of the charming side of Ace Bailey that if you've been around him at all, I think you get a sense of. So that was interesting. Jackson Zumwalt says, Jazz fans are arguing Isaiah's defense is more important than Key's scoring shooting. Do you agree? I think Key's shooting is so far superior because Key is, he's consistently gotten better defensively, but Collier still can't shoot. It's basically impossible for a guard to be good enough defensively for it to outrank a stellar offensive player, which is why teams bet on Luka Doncic and James Harden and, Shea, who's an okay defensive player. He's, the worst defensive player in that starting lineup, but that starting lineup's incredible. But no, Keyonte George's offense is far more valuable than Isaiah's defense. I don't know what to tell you. And Key's finding ways to make big defensive plays in key moments, and I think he's going to get better defensively. Is he going to be great? I don't know. His offense is good enough that if he's the 5th best defensive player on your team, you're okay. You can survive by it. Survive with it because his offense is getting to that level. But no, that's a crazy argument. I just can't imagine how good you'd have to be defensively to outrank the importance of scoring the ball at the rate that Keyonte is with that efficiency and making plays. It's just not. And he's not, he's not prime Damian Lillard offensively or defensively right now, where Dame just didn't do anything defensively. Or even Donovan Mitchell, who didn't do anything defensively. Just some of those guys are so bad on defense, it really is a huge setback. But even if you're terrible like Jalen Brunson, if you're that good offensively, which maybe that's where Keontae's headed, and I think he can be a better player. He's just so much bigger than Jalen Brunson is. Your offense is so valuable, and you can get guys around him to come in and help. I was watching, this is Steven Ritter, I was watching how the Mavs use Flag and the Jazz use Bailey, and I wonder if if the players were flipped, would Bailey have been thrust in the number 1 spot, or is Flag just that much better along in his development? Would Flag be slow played on this Jazz team? The Jazz would have given Flag more responsibility than they would Ace. Ace was always probably the most raw player in the top 5 picks. Said that last year leading up to the draft, still true. Ace is really raw still. He's super talented, crazy talent. It's going to take more development than where Flag is. And Flag learns quicker, I think. And Flag is probably just more naturally talented. Cooper Flag's just a freak. He's truly one of the best 18-year-olds I've ever seen. Maybe the best 18-year-old I've ever seen. He was that way in college. I know he's 19 now. Scoring 40 here in Salt Lake City was just absurd. He truly has a chance to put himself in the conversation among, the 10 greatest players of all time. He's that naturally gifted. His physical tools are insane. Seeing him up close was wild. He just looks so much longer in person than I expected him to, and he looks long on TV. So he's just a better player than Ace is at this point. It's why he went number 1 overall and why Ace fell to 5, and that's not a knock on Ace. Ace is fabulous. Ace is going to be a really, really great player. But the reason Flag has gotten so much opportunity, and look, if Ace was in Dallas, would he be getting more opportunity than he is in Utah? Yes. If Flag was in Utah, would he be getting as much opportunity as in Dallas? Probably not. Would he be getting more than Aces? Yes, I think he would be. Positive Jazz guy. You are Jazz GM for 24 hours and you get to make 2 trades. What trades do you make? Second part of the question, does it ever make sense to trade for one of your players' good friends? Like if the Jazz got Anthony Black for Key or Jabari Smith for Walker. We've seen that. Jazz did it with Donovan Mitchell. They brought in some of his friends. Did it with Darren Williams. They brought in some of his friends. I don't think it makes that much sense usually. I think once you start handing over the keys to the car of hey, we're gonna build a culture around you, I think you actually get negative culture. So you got to fit in, man. You got to figure out what we're doing here and figure out how you play a role, not how do we surround you with guys you like. You pay guys to come hang out in your house, come live with you if you want. Give them ideal living situations. You can do that. You don't have to necessarily eat up a roster spot with those guys. D. Brown didn't help the Jazz all that much, when he was in Utah to support Darren Williams. So I don't know how much I would do that. If I were to trade two guys, I would look at vets. It would probably be Kevin Love and Jusuf Nurkic. And by the way, I've loved covering those guys. Jusuf Nurkic, I've told you, I've tweeted it. It's my favorite Jazz player I've ever watched. He's really in that conversation. He and Jordan Clarkson, probably my two favorite Jazz players I've ever watched. Now, I really like Jordan, the person. I've not gotten to know Jusuf at all. He's very quiet. It's funny because he talks so much on the bench. I'm sure he's very boisterous in the locker room behind closed doors. When the media's in there, he's pretty quiet. He's usually got his back to the media. He gets dressed and kind of leaves, does his own thing. I really love watching him play. I love the things he does. I love the NBA because there is room for so many different types of players, including Kevin Love and including Jusuf Nurkic. They help you win games, is the truth. They are big guys who know how to help you win games. And if I were trying to lose, which I told you early in this podcast, I wouldn't be focused on winning above all else. You could probably do it by absolutely submarining one position, and one position that does things that help you win, which is grab rebounds. And that's what those guys do. Kevin Love hits threes and grabs rebounds. Nurkic runs your offense and grabs rebounds. And if you didn't have those things, you would lose a lot of games. So if I were to GM, I would probably get rid of those guys. Not because I don't enjoy them. I like them. But if I was trying to lose games to get a top 8 pick, would you trade Jusuf Nurkic and Kevin Love for a top 8 pick in this year's draft? Of course you would. No question about it. And that's kind of what the deal would be. So sorry to those two. I'm not advocating you trade anybody, but if that was my method and I wanted to do it without disrupting the entire process, I would find a way to trade those guys. And if that included having to include a second-round pick to get off of Nurk, maybe I could get it back by trading Kevin Love just for a second-round pick and a little bit of salary. $19 million is hard to trade, and that's what Nurk makes. Adam Ray. How do we trust this front office to ever compete for a title when they are too obsessed over draft picks? See, this is kind of the opposite where a lot of Jazz fans are. Draft picks matter. Draft picks are how this Jazz team has felt that they can get better. I don't think it's draft picks above all else from here on out. I think the Jazz do want to get good probably this summer. I think they're going to go out and add some veteran pieces to help win and move forward with Lowry and move forward with Keyonte and move forward with Ace Bailey and find the pieces around them that need to help and then hope that Flip or Taylor Hendricks or Isaiah Collier or Bryce Sensabaugh or Cody Williams or all these young guys, a couple of them step up and break out too and become, legit number 4 players or 5 players or whatever. And then you add veterans around them to win. And then you hope that, that Suns pick a couple of years from now does for the Jazz what Jalen Williams did for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Or this Lakers pick next year does for the Jazz what, the Chet Holmgren pick did. That was the Thunder's own pick. But you get what I'm saying, that those picks start to fit in. So the Jazz have been in the draft pick value headspace for a long time. I think they will probably stay there this season. I still think they're probably going to get back there, though they've not really indicated that's going to be the case. And then they're going to move off of it, especially when it comes to their own picks. Jazz Time Jones. Again, guys, we're on last week's questions. We haven't gotten to this week. This is going to go long. Appreciate everyone standing with me. Jazz Time Jones. Since the Jazz have swap rights to 2 picks this year, can they trade those rights to another team? I think you can trade, so what you can do is you can trade the lesser of a trade. So if you end up with a 3rd pick, you can say, well, the Jazz get, the second best, or the Jazz say, we'll take the last trade value, but you can't just trade up straight swap rights. Now, you can, I think you have to have a more firm idea of what that pick's going to be. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, someone correct me. But you can say, we'll take the second best of the 3 picks, or the worst of the 3 picks, or the best of the 3 picks. But it's hard to trade swap rights with another team until those picks are settled. Jesse, seems like Kevin Love has surprised Jazz fans this year, both on the court and as a positive locker room guy. Would it be crazy to keep him through the deadline and maybe even give him a contract next year? No, it's not crazy, but I doubt it. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's played well enough to have value. And before he twists an ankle, has his back act up, whatever his knee, whatever shoulder it could be, I think you could probably get a little bit of value for Kevin Love and do right by Kevin by putting him on a contender in a big city that he wants to win on. And not that he's voiced that at all this year that I've heard, other than that was kind of the rumor in the offseason. He's not going to win here. So you might as well put him on a team where they can get some victories and see if that's beneficial for him. And look, he's played well enough, you can probably get a pick back. I'm talking about a second-round pick, but why not get a second-round pick versus letting him hit free agency? I don't think he's re-signing here. So if he's not re-signing here, might as well try and get something for him. All right, moving on to this week's questions. Probably another 15 more, so we got a little bit ahead of us. Appreciate everyone. I'll try and move through these a little more quickly. Jimbo Slice, this one will be easy. Saw a billboard that said Cozy Earth sheets are the Jazz official sheets for the Utah Jazz. What does that mean? Are there even beds in the arena? There are medical beds. I've seen that. So there's probably a bedroom somewhere. You know, if I were Ryan Smith, my first thing would have been to have like a great bedroom that I could stay in if I needed to stay somewhere overnight. Maybe the Mammoth were in town the next day and I didn't want to drive back to Provo or wherever he lives to go home. I would love to build a bed somewhere. So I bet there is. Yeah, it's just, the sponsorship, whatever. There's Lola blankets, there's cozy sheets, whatever. You can make $1 and say you're the official this of that of an NBA team. I guess you might as well do it. Jake the Lynx has a couple of questions, including he says, I think the Jazz are letting Key and Lowry win some games now to help their campaigns for Most Improved and All-Star. And then we'll do more after awards are announced to lose games. Those aren't going to, you're certainly not going to announce Most Improved. What do you think? What are the chances that Key wins Most Improved and Lowry win All-Star this year? Lowry has a chance to make the All-Star team. He really does because of what we talked about. Are the Jazz good enough to be in a spot where he gets picked as one of the international players? There are 5 or 6 locks ahead of him. We mentioned them already. Jokic, Giannis, Shea, Wemby, or like certain locks. Jamal Murray's got a good case to make it this year. As a Canadian, he's also done very well. And then Lowry's in that kind of 7, 8, 9 group, 6, 7, 8, 9 group. Does he get picked there? He might. And yeah, he may want to, it may mean something to him. So the Jazz may keep him on the floor. In fact, I'd heard that it happened a couple of years ago. He wanted to make an all-star push. And that was also before he got his contract. So I think that might have been the case. And then, when it seemed clear that wasn't going to be the case, he started missing more games. That could happen. Most improved player, maybe for Keyonte, but that shouldn't matter in all honesty. Just, it doesn't matter to most improved, to guys winning most improved player if you're an all-star. No one cares about being most improved player if you've made the all-star team. Lowry being an all-star probably means more to him than being a most improved player award winner at some point in his career. So Keyonte could accidentally get there. It's going to come down to games played. If the difference between Keyonte winning most improved player and the Jazz having a top 8 pick is, the two things you're deciding between, I think the Jazz will take the top 8 pick, unfortunately for Keyonte. Jake the Lynx's wife has a question. Mrs. the Lynx. She wants to know what young players you think that might be reasonable targets for the Jazz to trade this offseason. What would the Jazz roster help them compete next year? Like I said, I think Bryce, Flip, Isaiah probably have the most value. I don't think you would trade them in season this year. I don't think you need to make consolidation trades. In fact, what you may do is do more hunger games. That if you do end up not playing Lowry, or you trade away some of the veterans, or you don't play Keyonte late in the season, you do hunger games with Isaiah, Flip, Bryce, Cody, Taylor, Ace, and just say, who's going to emerge? Which one of you guys is going to become the guy? You got to play within the system. You got to do all the things the right way. But who's going to become the guy that is a major piece of this franchise going forward? Ace might be too young to throw in that conversation, but you've seen really good things from Taylor Hendricks in recent weeks. So I think that's been interesting. I probably wouldn't trade any of them. I don't know if that's going to be how the Jazz approach it. Kincaid Upstill asked about the Cavs protection pick with the Thunder and the trade. As I mentioned, the Jazz need to own their own pick to be able to swap with the Cavs, so you've got to hold on to that. Make Colorado great again. Says, ideas to fix the lottery and avoid teams tanking. My thoughts, even the odds, just make it 1 through 18, 7 and 8 seeds get in the lottery, but make it so the 8 play-in teams get automatic 5 through 12 picks. They can't fall in the lottery, but they can't jump up. That's interesting. You kind of, tier it out a little bit more. All the picks are up for grabs. There's actually some value to still making the playoffs, because if you make the playoffs as the 7th or 8th seed, you still get into the lottery. That might encourage teams that are in the 5th and 6th spot to fall to 7 and 8 to say, hey, who cares if we're playing the number 1 or 2 seed? We'd rather have a chance to move up to the number 5 draft. Honestly, I would probably go the opposite route. I would say only the top 3 picks are up for grabs. Only the teams with the 3 worst records have a chance to get those top 3, and everyone else just goes in order. And that's it. You don't get to, there's no reason to be 6, 7, or 8 if you can't jump up. The 7th pick traditionally is not that good. 8th pick is traditionally not that good. It's going to go to a team who's actually the 7th or 8th worst team in the league. And if they draft well, great, you get a player. But if you're not going to try and improve your roster through free agency or through trades, you're just going to be stuck here, and that's not good for you. So don't try and do it that way. Don't just try and hope the lottery bails you out or the draft lottery bails you out over and over. You've got to go out and add pieces, develop the pieces you do have, and make smart trades. I think by flattening the lottery odds already, which is what Adam Silver did, he's caused this entire mess. The reason so many teams tank right now is because teams say, well, Dallas won. Well, Atlanta won. Well, the Spurs moved up. All these teams move up from 6, 7, 8 to move up to number one. Number one seed never gets the worst team in the league never gets the number one overall pick. They always fall to 4 or 5 now. Jazz experienced it. Pistons have experienced it. Pistons got better. Yes, they have a number one pick. They got Cade, but they went out and they added a bunch of veterans and they got better. The Jazz aren't going to make a major jump until they go out and sign veterans to get better. That's the case with everybody. You've got to have a good program that can convince players to come, and that's difficult when you're trying to sell snow and mountains over beaches and sunlight. It just is. It's harder for the Jazz. So in that sense, I don't blame the Jazz for doing what they're doing, but you're having teams that even have great cities to market, putting themselves in lottery positions to get lottery picks because they can add that to the sunlight, to the beach, to the ocean that they can sell, to perfect weather year round. That's hurt the league. So I would get rid of the flattening of the odds. I would make it so the top 3 teams have overwhelmingly likely odds of getting there. Most teams can't have one of the 3 worst records in the NBA. You're out of it within a month of the beginning of the season, so you might as well make a push for something from there. I would try and discourage teams from tanking as early in the season as possible, and we've done the opposite. We encourage teams to do it the longer the season goes on. Aiden Taylor, if the Jazz don't land a top 3 pick, what are potential moves that could make us a playoff team in the offseason? It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. The West is not as impenetrable as it felt like it was going to be 24 months ago, even 12 months ago, even 6 months ago during the offseason. I think you can get into the playoffs in the West. You know, the Clippers are falling apart. Spurs are going to be really good. Thunder are going to be really good. Denver's going to be really good. Houston should be pretty good. We'll see. Kevin Durant, I don't know how much longer he's going to be at this level. And then do you have the next guy? Like, it's just pretty wide open. Actually, the Lakers are going to be hairy at best. It's, Luka's great. You got to build around him. You got to go out and add pieces. You should be able to. You should have some lottery flexibility. Austin Reeves, what does he look like as, the number 1 guy or number 2 guy next to Luka? There's some questions there. He's really good. So I think you can get into that 5, 6, 7, 8 range relatively easily by just going out and getting the best backup center in the NBA. And, maybe you got to overpay for him a little bit and a couple of steady, solid 3-and-D wing guys. And, I'd be foolish to try and name. I don't even know who else is going to be a free agent this summer. I haven't looked that far ahead. But those are the types of things you can do. Trade for some of those guys. Go out and get a couple of pieces that can step in and play well for you and hope they click in and do more of what Will Hardy needs you to do. It's not crazy. It's not this impossible hurdle to climb. I don't think it's the perfect third player that Stockton and Malone tried to find forever, and Jeff Malone or Tom Chambers or, finally finding it in Jeff Hornacek. I don't think it's that steep of a climb. I don't think it's that difficult of a pick to find, or player to find, I should say. It's a little more wide open than that because of how the modern NBA operates by valuing more players throughout your roster than maybe just your top 3. Trevor Webb, I was pro tank, but the more the season goes on, I think we might just be too good to tank. If our wins are coming with Isaiah Hendricks, Taylor Hendricks, or Isaiah Collier, Taylor Hendricks, Kyle Filipowski, and Cody Williams all leveling up, isn't that more valuable to the franchise than hitting all those picks than trying to keep one that's 5 through 8? I just don't think you're actually hitting on all those guys. And the problem is, it's like, how high are they hitting? Are they so to go back to my last question, you get to the playoffs by having 2 top 50 guys, which the Jazz honestly might have. Lowry is there. Keyonte could be in that conversation. Like, we'd be curious to see what NBA rank has him at next season for NBA or for ESPN. Like, he might be a top 80 guy. He might be top 60. He might be top 50, depending on how the Jazz close the season. I really don't know. But just surrounding it with 6 other top 180, top 200 players in the NBA probably gets you pretty close to being a playoff team. So are Taylor Hendricks, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, Cody Williams is a stretch for Cody, and that's not a knock on Cody. He was that raw, he's that thin. All the areas he needs to grow physically before he can be in this conversation. Same thing. Are they just the 150th to 250th best players in the NBA, and you just have 5 of them on your roster, and so you're that good? Or are they actually good enough to move the needle and be above replacement level players? I don't know. I'm not of the opinion some elitists think that there's only 8 guys in the NBA that matter and everyone else stinks and you can't win with them. I'm not of that opinion. I think you use the top 100 players the right way, you can build the Indiana Pacers. You can build some of these rosters that have won titles or have at least gotten really close. You don't necessarily have to just have a top 5 guy. It helps, but you don't necessarily just have to have that. But you probably do have to have 2 top 50 guys and then a bunch of top 100 or top 150 guys around them do the Jazz just have those guys and young players? Sometimes you can fool yourself into thinking, well, if the young player's top 150 now, that means they're going to be top 60 next year, and they never get above top 150, and then you overinvest in them or you overpay them, and then you get stuck. That's the danger for the Jazz, is that, how valuable are the rest of these young guys, or are they getting closer to their ceilings? I don't know. To answer your question, Trevor, I would probably still take a top 5 or 8 pick over just one of those guys, betting on them turning into the next Keyonte George and breaking out in year 3. But that doesn't mean you move off of them. You let them go out there and, like I said, Hunger Games, so you can do it. Nate says, I'm curious about the future point guard or backup point guard future. I prefer Walt's upside, but I also like the change of pace and unique passing of Isaiah Collier. Can the two coexist in the long run, or do you anticipate a trade sooner to open up more steady minutes? I think there's a world where you can have Keyonte, Isaiah, Walt, and a fourth guard, ideally Darren Peterson, but whoever, that eats up all of your minutes. You need a bigger guard, the problem. You need your other guy, the fourth member in that group, has to be 6'6" or taller. Probably has to be a stalwart defensively. Doesn't need to have as much playmaking because the other 3 of those guys have some pretty good playmaking, but needs to shoot because everyone can shoot. But doesn't probably eat up a lot of point guard minutes. That's really the key for the Jazz. But I think you can keep those other 2 guys because Isaiah is the only position-specific player, and even that changes a little bit. Here, let me pull up my stats really quick. Isaiah Collier this year, and again, it's so low, it almost doesn't matter. Isaiah is shooting 37% from 3 this year. He's only taking 1.2 attempts per game. That is a 13th most on the roster. That's fewer than Yusuf Nurkic. That's fewer than Cody Williams. In fact, that was fewer per game than even Walker Kessler. So it's not a weapon, but the fact that he's hitting them is a good sign. It makes him passable, and it gives him an NBA future. If he shoots 20% and doesn't take any, he's probably not an NBA player. It's honestly it's that dire for him. So the fact that he's taking smarter threes is a good sign. His free throws are going in a little bit higher rate, about 70%. Not great, but okay. That's totally fine. That's totally acceptable, and you can live with that. He's got to just get it up to 2 attempts a game and shoot 35%, and that'll make him a much better player. But he's point guard specific. You want Keyonte playing as many point guard minutes as possible, but he can play 10 off the ball if he has to. And then I think Walt can probably play 10 or 15 off the ball as well. Maybe he's just a 15 or 20-minute player in the NBA overall. And then you could add one more player in the backcourt there. So I don't think you actually have to pick right now. You certainly don't have to make a trade right now to get rid of either one of them. I think they can both play. Let's see here. With the breakout of Key, this is from Nadles or Nadles. I know I've answered one of these questions from last week. He says, with the breakout of Key, I feel it's more important that the Jazz get a top pick. Are we just at the mercy of the lottery balls bouncing the way for the first time Jazz ever? A little bit. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think of, yes, if you keep this roster together wherever the Jazz fall in the lottery or going into the lottery night, that if you had Keyonte and you have Lowry and you have Ace and some of these other good young players around them, and Lady Luck, falls in the Jazz's lap for the first time ever, and they get an AJ DeBonta or a Darren Peterson or a Cam Boozer, how quickly this could come together. I mean, that really is the best case scenario for the Jazz right now. Hold on to the young guys or the guys you currently have, the more established guys, Key and Lowry. Hope one of your other young players breaks out and then have some lottery luck and move up into the top 3 in a draft that has stars coming your way if you move into that spot. I hate to say it's that simple. Somewhat is. Spurs are relevant because they have Wemby and they have Dylan Harper and they got Steph Castle. Thunder are relevant not just because they got Chet, but they would look different without Chet. Like Chet really helps with Shea and with J-Dub. So it helps to have lottery picks, have top 3 guys in drafts where the top 3 guys are going to be really good. And Chet went 3rd. He's probably a better player than Jabari Walker, and that really worked out for them very well. But the teams that matter for the most part matter because they have pretty good picks that have panned out. Sam Judd. With the Jazz winning more than expected, do you think the Jazz make more of an effort to trade guys like Nurk, Svi, and Kevin Love? Yes, I do. Those guys have value. They're winning you games. Like I had said, if I had to make 2 trades, it would probably be you just submarine your center position and you make Kyle Filipowski or Taylor Hendricks play that spot for the rest of the season. You say, I'm sorry, you're taking one for the team. Sometimes you got to play out of position, but that's the truth. You're going to play the 5. Jazz are going to lose the rebounding battle every night. The possession battle is just a math equation. You lose the math equation, you lose a lot of games. Nurk, you get something back for if you could. If you have to attack just second, you get that second back by trading Kevin Love. I think you do it. It's a brutal business. It's not fun. Those guys have been enjoyable to be around. I think the team likes them. I think the coaches like them. But that's just the nature of the biz. Scott Johnson. Was the game against the Detroit Pistons a good one? These fans on the front row didn't look like they were having a good time. I don't know. Scott, was that you? He tweets out photos of a woman with dramatic bangs. They look good. And a man in a Hawaiian shirt. Maybe I'm supposed to know who these people are, but maybe not. I don't know. I think they had a good time. Weird to sit right next to the bench. I bet they heard some. I bet they didn't recognize what sitting that close to an NBA game actually felt like and what the language was like. And not just that, but how intense it is. It's fun sitting close, man. I don't get to sit courtside. Have at some summer league games in the past, and it's fun to sit that close and see how big the players are. And it's a unique experience. You get a chance, and I know it's pricey, but probably change your view on the NBA. See how quickly everyone's moving and how good everyone actually is. It's worthwhile. The real Rigelis says, do any of the players have pregame rituals the fans don't really get to see? I'm always curious how these crazy talents get in proper headspace focus states and don't throw up before every single game. He said, I'm the one that used to feel nauseous before rec league games. I don't know specifically some of these guys' pregames. I should ask, Mike Conley famously kind of listened to the same music and drove to the arena the same way. Some of these guys are so young in the NBA. I wonder if they even had time to develop a routine. A lot of guys eat the same meal beforehand. So yes, I'm sure they do. I honestly don't know. I will ask that question. I've tried to follow through on asking some of those questions. I'll ask guys, maybe Keyonte, how has his pre-game routine evolved since being a rookie when you're just trying to be which road am I on in Salt Lake City and where do I park at Delta Center versus where you are year 3 now that you're good, now that you're playing 30 minutes a night, you can control some of those other things that maybe didn't matter as much. Jabornik, I guess I should answer this one on Twitter. He says, where can I find your podcast? YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts as well. We do that. We're trying to put it out there in front of everybody. Only a couple more, so we'll get through this. It says, this is Alex Atwood. How do you feel about the recent talks of the commissioner trying to put a halt to tanking? If you were the commissioner, what would you do? I touched on it already. I would do the opposite of what they've done. I would make the tanking so valuable at the top that you either have to really commit to being a 12-win team and say, well, there's only 3 teams doing that, and everyone else is just going to try and make the playoffs, or it's not worth tanking at all. It's just not worth tanking if you can't move out from the 8th pick, and that's just where you're going to be, and you have zero chance of moving up. I think teams that feel like they have a chance to move up say, well, might as well move from 8 to 7 if we have a chance moving up, and might as well move 6 to 5. If you have no value from moving from 8 to 5, why would you be 5? If there's no value in getting up into the top 3 picks, historically, teams recognize the gap between the 8th pick and the 5th pick is not enormously dramatic. Now, it's better. The higher you are, every pick is better. It is. That's the truth. But I just don't think teams are going to be as aggressive if they don't feel like there's any chance to move up into those top 3 spots and get the number 1 overall player. I would take a lot more. I would spread the lottery balls out less than they currently are. I'd give fewer opportunities around the league. Jesse, I think this is our last question, maybe one more. Seems like the Jazz need to pick a direction for the rest of the season, especially with Keontae's emergence. If they are intent on keeping the pick, what are the avenues of getting significantly worse? If Key and Lowry are off the limits, does trading Svi, K-Love, and Kyle Anderson move the needle? Probably not Kyle Anderson just because he doesn't play a whole lot, but I would certainly keep an eye on him being traded if that was out there. You trading veterans that help you win is a good way to do it. I think that's probably the easiest way to get worse without completely disrupting the system other than just benching your best players, which hard to do in December. Probably gets easier to do every month of the season. We'll see if that does happen to be the case in January. You would certainly know if the Jazz start resting Keyonte George games what the approach is. This, I believe, is the last question. Worried Note says, Will has been subbing Ace out within the first 4 minutes of the game, often before he's touched the ball on offense. Why? How can he ever find the offensive rhythm he needs? I don't think they want Ace playing tired. I think when he plays tired, he gets in foul trouble, and then you can't play him when you want him. You don't want him getting hurt. So I think they want to make sure he's feeling good when he's coming out of the game. But you also want to start him. And because you are starting him, you are playing him next to Lowry Markkanen and Keyonte George, who deserve offensive touches over Ace Bailey right now. So right now, it's just kind of a little bit of an unlucky spot to be in for Ace. I still think it's the right decision, and I actually really support the idea of only playing him when he's got his high stamina. He's going to get in better shape. He's got to get in better shape. Young guys aren't in good shape. It's just they're not strong enough to compete at this level. Keyonte George is playing so well right now because he's in way, 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 way better shape than he was. That's the biggest key for Keyonte. He's in better shape. He's taking fewer tire shots. The less tired shots he takes, the more shots go in. The more shots that go in, the better he is. It's just that simple. And, he's worked on his skills. Don't get me wrong. Technique is better. Understanding of the game is better. Being in better shape allows him to have more energy to do the right thing more often. Run back on defense, make smarter plays on offense, not let, being tired influence how he plays. It's a big thing. So it will help Ace as well. And right now the Jazz are probably protecting Ace a little bit more than fans probably realize. All right, I think that's it. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. That ended up being really long for a solo podcast. It will definitely be out on audio. I hope this is out on video on YouTube as well. I couldn't tell if it was recording or not because I'm a bit of a boomer myself and I can't figure out how all this stuff works. But I'm trying my best. We will be back with you next week. No Thursday show because it's New Year's, not working on New Year's. But I believe it'll be back to the full strength coming up next Monday with Chandler Holt. Enjoy your new year. Drive safely. Buckle up. Drive responsibly. And we'll talk to you guys next year. Thanks as always for listening.